Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Think Chatbot. This is Think Chatbot number 6, if I'm not mistaken. And more importantly, it's the first Think Chatbot of 2021. It is the 5th of January. Sorry, why December? 5th of January as we're recording this. I'm Alex, and I'm joined today with Jacob. Do you want to say hi, Jacob?
Hi there. Nice to see you all again. A few returning faces and a few new ones. My chin there being one of the new faces, as I've had to shave off the old beard for any of the returning viewers wondering what's going on.
Yeah, I would really like to see people going from Think Chatbot number 5 to Think Chatbot number 6, wondering who's this young guy in here. I've never seen him before. Okay, cool. So if you've never been to one of these before, we try to basically build a bot in about 40 to 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes several episodes, which I don't think actually has happened yet, but I know we have a few in the bag for this this first quarter of the year. And so if you're joining us live, you're going to see this live. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously, feel free to pause and have a little break when you're bored of our faces. For the first video or for the first recording of the year, what are we going to build, Jacob?
So we're going to focus on something which is very chatbot related and HR related as typical. We're looking at how like a chatbot can help triage employees to kind of get in touch with HR, different contact routes. But we also kind of want to look at this not just in terms of actually getting employees in touch with HR, but in terms of keeping your chatbot efficient and scalable. Because I think it's one thing we were talking about with the start of the new year. As businesses grow, you want to make sure the process is scalable. So we'll be looking at that as whilst we go around things.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a really good topic. I'm excited about this. So what we're probably going to do is split this up into 3 parts. If you've joined one of these before, you'll know that we usually do 2 parts, which is the first we go through a bit of explanation of what we're going to build. So Jacob will go through that. And then usually I spend the rest of the time building things and we have a bit of back and forth on that. And then that's the end. In this particular episode, what we're going to do is we'll have the first 2 parts are going to be the same as usual, but then there's going to be a third part, which is going to be about discussing how we would actually change the way we build things depending on how we want to scale this bot in the future. And so, yeah, make sure you stick around until the end because there's going to be some really actionable insights towards the end. All right, should we get started?
Yeah, I think so. Let's get stuck in.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to run us through what we're going to do?
Okay, yeah, of course. So as always, starting off with a merit board here. So the typical process that we're looking at here is obviously an employee wants to kind of contact HR. So the chatbot's the first thing it's going to do is try and clarify their reason for contacting HR. So this might be, say, like, payroll, time off work, something personal. And from then, once it kind of knows the category that they are kind of trying to contact HR with, it's going to look and try and get a little bit more information from the employee. So this will be kind of typically like a long written kind of paragraph or so about why they need to get in touch with HR. And obviously there's a side step off from this, which is sometimes it might be a personal reason that the employee doesn't want to specifically say to the chatbot. So it's nice to include that in. And then from there, we've kind of got the final point of the triaging, which is also kind of asking the best way to get that so not the best way, but the way that the employee would prefer to be contacted by HR. Would this be by scheduling a phone call, booking a meeting, or even just triggering a live chat there and then?
Perfect. Yeah, there's a few good things in here. I particularly obviously like the providing an option to skip this step. If you work in HR, you'll probably really appreciate this as well. So we're going to go through all of this. So okay, I'll switch to the platform, and I'll start building. So keep an eye on the chart, Jacob, and let me know what I'm building as I'm doing it. So obviously, we, as usual, are starting from a brand new ubisend account. So if you were just purchasing a license today, this is what you would get. You would get a platform that has nothing basically pre-built into it, except a few of the conversations that we'll have a look at in a minute. So obviously, I don't have any performance dashboard, any metrics, or anything like that. As you'll realize, the ubisend platform is extremely flexible. And for that purpose, we try to give all of the power into your own hands to build the things that you want. And that includes obviously the dashboard, which is why I don't have any metrics. If you've watched our videos or if you joined this before, I always start with this because this is like the landing page when you log into the platform. So I don't know if it's actually super valuable for people to know this, but either way, here we are. Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is a brand new account, and it doesn't mean that it comes with nothing at all. One of the important parts of the ubisend platform and ubisend in general is that we've been in this business for a long, long time. And although we want to, like I just said, give you all the power to do everything that you'd like, we also realize that it's quite nice sometimes to give you a bit of a head start. And so as a default, you'll have a few conversations that are pre-built into the platform. These are completely editable. You can delete them, you can lock them if you'd like. So if you have junior employees that you don't necessarily want to mess around with these, you can just lock these conversations so that they can't delete them or do anything weird with them. But just to say that you will obviously have something to start with, which is quite nice. But all of these are very, very basic. They just do the normal things that a chatbot should be able to do, such as handling FAQs or handling human fallback, a welcome message, which we'll look at in a minute. Nothing that we really need for what we're building today. So what we're going to start with is probably build, as usual, the skeleton of the conversation. We're going to start to build it in a way, like I mentioned earlier, that is really, really efficient for what we're trying to achieve right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a conversation in a very linear format. So here the conversation is, what would we call it, Jacob?
So I think we'll just call this kind of contacting HR.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, this conversation helps employees get in touch with HR in a way they using the channel they want. Okay, so as usual, I like to give a fairly descriptive description, and this just helps later on for admin purposes. It's quite nice to be able to figure out and scroll through all of the conversations we might have. You might have 50 or 60 conversations in there, so being quite descriptive is obviously important. Okay, so we're going to set up a trigger. The trigger of a conversation is obviously, as its name implies, it is the thing. I'm doing quotation marks, but you can't see me. But it is the thing that triggers the conversation. So it is the event that needs to happen for this specific conversation to start. So what's really important is within the ubisend platform, you have an incredible large amount of events available. I think the last time we checked, it was about 55 or something like that, 55, 60 maybe. So if I click on this drop down here, you can see all of them. So there's a whole bunch of events that you can use. As you can see, it's many, many, many. Now, the second thing that's important here is that although there's loads and loads of events, you can even go one step further and use categories of events. So what I mean by this, it sounds a bit geeky, but what I mean by this is that, let's say I want to start a conversation when a user sends a specific message. That's all well and good. I can do that. I can do equals and then a specific message. And then if someone says these exact words, the conversation is going to start. But what I mean by the categories is that it's more than just that. So if we do a message, for instance, we could trigger a conversation when a message is sent that is an email or a number or a percentage or all of these things here. So as you can see, the 55 or 60 events that I mentioned earlier are all of a sudden multiplied by however many categories we have here. And this is the same across all of the different events. So literally you could have thousands and thousands of ways to trigger a conversation, which is really, really good if you want to have full control over the chatbots that you want to build, which is exactly what the ubisend platform is here for. Okay, bit of a rant. For this one, as usual, we're going to start with a message, a specific message to trigger the conversation. There's two reasons we're doing this. The first one is because it's going to make it super easy for us to test the bot as we build it, because we can just keep going to the demo section of the website, of the platform, and just send this very specific message. It doesn't require anything very complicated. And the second reason is this might be a way that you're going to do it yourselves. So if you have an HR chatbot on your, let's say, HR platform or on your website, you might want to trigger this conversation when someone says help or help or something like that. Now, some common ways that this specific type of conversations will be triggered are also page URLs. So if your employees go to the help page of your HR portal, for instance, this could be quite common. And then if things like the subscriber is stuck, for instance, things like that can be triggered as well. Quite frequently, these conversations will also be triggered from an FAQ, which is not something we're going to go into right now. But if an employee asks a question to your bot and the bot just answers, you should actually contact HR about this. You could have a button there that triggers these conversations, all sorts of stuff that will, again, like we mentioned in the introduction, help you scale your bot beyond just a simple flow approach. All right, so what should be the trigger? Something that we can remember, Jacob, this time, please.
Yeah, we're very good at choosing triggers that we can't remember. I think maybe even something just like contact HR is quite a simple one there, or even just CHR, just shorten it down.
Okay, let's do CHR. Okay, so when someone sends this specific message, the conversation will start. All right. Perfect. The conversation has been created. As you can see, we're now in the conversation builder. It's quite important to realize that this is the conversation builder for this specific one conversation. It's not the conversation builder for your entire chatbot. That's a really important distinction between the ubisend platform and any other platforms that you might have used before, which we'll get back to in a minute when we discuss scalability. Okay, so what we're seeing here is obviously the conversation trigger at the top, which we can have a look at. If we click view the trigger, we can see that when any of the following conditions are met, a message is sent to the bot, which is equal to CHR, this conversation is going to trigger. Obviously, to carry on with the things I was discussing before, we can add more conditionals. We can do all sorts of things, like say all of these are happening. So again, you can do loads and loads of things. Okay. Cool, so that's the trigger. Now what's happening next is we have a little arrow that goes from the trigger to the very first step, which is pre-built for you. It just says an example message, so it's not very valuable at the moment, but it is there so that it's a bit more helpful for you. And as you can see, there's a little reminder here that says when a message is equals to CHR, we're going to move to the first step. Okay, so obviously we have nothing on this conversation at the moment. So what are we doing first? What's the first step, Jacob?
So obviously by this point, the user's already said they want to contact HR. So now the chatbot's going to be kind of clarifying their reason for doing so. So I think it's probably the best way to do this is obviously there's been quite a lot of different reasons. So I think if we can kind of give them a load of options to choose from, almost say like a group of different options, pick from one of these options to why you want to contact HR. Okay,
yeah, that's a good point. I think it's a very important point to make as well, that obviously, again, here we're using a keyword that's absolutely not the way you're going to use it in real life. But it's important. Jacob's point is really important, that by the time they get to this message, the user has already stipulated to the bot that they want to talk to HR. So we don't need to confirm that anymore. We don't need to send them somewhere else. We can just start with this conversation straight away. So that's a really important distinction. Okay, so this first step is going to be reason for contacting HR. Okay, I can save that. So this is the step details. This is literally just the name of the step. This is for admin purposes again. So if I close this, you can see that the name here has changed. This is just for me to know, okay, this step is about this. So quite important, but nothing that the user is going to see, nothing that your employees are going to see. Okay, so we're going to ask, why are you contacting HR, basically? Yeah. Do you want to give me a specific copy, or should I just make it up?
I think we can probably just go with of course, I can pass you through to HR. Firstly, what's your reason for contacting them?
Okay. What I might do is I might split this up into a few different messages because it's just quite nice. Oh, no problem. I can pass you on to HR. What did you say? What is?
What's your reason for contacting?
What is your reason for contacting? Okay, so what you can do here is we can provide a bit of direction to the user, which is something that's quite nice. You can do so with buttons. You can do so with loads of different little UI things that you can use. In this instance, what we're probably going to use is we're going to use quick replies. So as you can see, quick replies here just appeared as I changed the message type. If I re-click on this just for a second, you can see that there's quite a few different ways of presenting the different messages that you'd like to present to the users. So you can send a standard message, which is literally just free text, or sorry, plain text, or you can send a quick reply, which has buttons. Actions has buttons as well, and we have images, videos, all that sort of stuff. But for now, we're going to stick to a quick reply. And as you can see, we can have up to 10 little buttons here. So what should I add, Jacob?
I think we'll try and keep things quite general. So we'll go to say salary and pay, the first one.
Yep.
And then you'll have annual leave as a second.
Yep.
Sickness.
Yep.
Maternity / paternity. I always pronounce paternity wrong. I think I actually managed to get it right there, which is a first for me. But for some reason, that word always falls over.
I think we should make up a new word, parentinity. I don't know.
Yeah, that's normally how it ends up coming out whenever I'm talking about it. I think then the next one will be benefits. Much easier word to say there.
Perfect.
And I suppose
All
we
right.
can say something else. I just don't think for the purpose of the video we need to kind of have a completely exhaustive list, but I think that kind of summarizes.
No, that's good. I think the important bit here is there's something else. I think that's quite important because quite frequently you'll reach out to HR with something very specific in mind, but that doesn't necessarily fall into this. Let's say requesting time off because of death in the family or something like that. So it may not always fall into the specific, overarching themes, and so it's quite important not to completely block the user when they're using your bot by giving a preset of options that don't necessarily encompass everything, because that might alienate them from moving forward. So, okay, so we can save this. We can close this. All right. So this is the very first message. No problem, I can pass you on to HR. So again, remember, by the time they get here, they have already said to the bot that they would like to speak to HR. So perfect. What is your reason for contacting? Salary and pay, annual leave, sickness, maternity or paternity, benefits, something else. Let's have a quick look at what this looks like in the actual bot. So it is CHR. No problem, I can pass you on to HR. Blah, 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 blah. And the buttons are here. Very easy to use on a computer, very easy to use on a mobile as well, because you can just swipe these buttons towards the right or the left, and you can just click these buttons. Very, very simple. Okay, that's the first step done. What are we doing next?
So I think by this point, obviously the user's clarified their kind of category for contacting HR, then it's good to kind of take a second to get a bit of extra information from them. So maybe kind of open it up to let them type a message themselves that can be forwarded on to HR. Okay,
perfect. So I'm just going to add a new message, more information. So again, this is the step title, not something that the user is going to see, so you can put whatever you'd like. I encourage you to be quite descriptive in here as well. And the transition to get to this step is just going to be a message is sent. So whatever the user clicks on this little set of buttons, they will get to the next step. So that's an important distinction, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so we'll say, what would you like to discuss? I'm struggling with copy today. I don't really know why.
I think maybe it's something along the lines of, do you want to give a little bit more information about your issue or why you'd like to talk to HR? And then we should probably also remember that this is where we want to provide the option for the employees to skip this step if they'd like.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, I'm going to, so this is actually quite interesting. So I started this message as a question, which is completely fine. You can do that. The reservation I have here is a question is sometimes going to imply responses that are not very helpful from the user. So would you like to give me a little bit more information about your query before I pass you on to HR? Someone could say, no, which is fine. But if you want to do some validation on these messages later on, this might not be the right way to do it. So here we could change this to just a statement. So we could say, I can take more information about your query before I pass you on to HR. And then we're going to do another quick reply. Pass me on Okay, something like this. Or what did you have in your thing? That was quite nice actually. No, it's too personal. Okay,
Yeah,
so this, yeah, go ahead.
well, no, I think we're probably just about to say the same thing there, but yeah, I think it's quite nice to kind of give the employees the option to not always feel like they're forced through the chatbot and they kind of forced through steps. They've got a bit of conversation to it and a bit of choice going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to give them the option, and if they click this button, they move on. They move on to the next phase. Again, we don't want to stop them from moving forward, so that's really, really important. We don't want to block them in an infinite loop as they're trying to reach out to HR because they're sick. Like that would be, imagine how frustrating that would be. So you want to make sure that the validation that goes between the two, between one message and the next, is helpful for the conversation, is helpful for the logs that you want to keep on these conversations and things like that. But you don't want to completely lock this conversation so that people can't actually move forward, because the thing that they'll do after that is they'll pick up the phone and call your HR department, which is obviously completely missing the point of the bot and of gathering information. Okay, so someone says they want to contact HR. They say that it's about annual leave, and they have an option to give a bit more information about what they'd like to do, or move forward to the next step if it's too personal and they don't want to talk about it to the bot. Perfect. What are we doing next?
So I think by this point, it's probably about a nice time to kind of start triaging them towards their preferred contact method. So yeah, as you can see on the screen there, we've got schedule a call, book a meeting, or trigger live chat.
Okay, so in this instance, we're going to give the user 3 options. Contact, ways of contacting HR. Okay, so again, we want to do this when the user sends anything to the bot. We don't want to do any validation here. Very important not to keep people completely stuck in this loop. Okay, how would you like to contact your HR rep? Okay, and in this instance, what we can do is make use of another message type, which could be action messages. So as you can see, I'm going to do team. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so as you can see, we now have the option to add buttons here below it. So I can add another button. I could add another button, up to 5 buttons here under this message. Very, very, again, a nice message type to use for UX in general. Very big buttons, very easy to use. And it just helps the conversation move forward without requiring the user to just think too much about what they'd like to say. So in this instance, we're going to do live chat, phone call, face to face. Okay, so what I've done here is I've obviously given these buttons a name. So as you can see, it displays here on the right. Perfect. But more importantly, what I've done is I've created postback buttons. Now, postback buttons are quite important in the ubisend platform because those are the little keys that are hidden behind the buttons, behind the things you click on, to actually give instructions to the bot of what the bot should do next. So it sounds quite complex, but it's actually super simple. In here, for instance, I can give this, sorry, I'm touching my microphone. So here in this instance, we're saying live chat, and what we could do is give this a little key code in the backend that will be triggered when the user clicks this specific button. So here we have live chat. I can do phone call. I can do face to face. So again, this right column here doesn't display to the user. All that it does is ties this little bit of code in the backend of the bot to say to the bot, when the user clicks this button, send this key to the backend of the bot. And we're going to make use of that to actually transition the user to the right place in the conversation. Does that make sense, Jacob?
Yeah, indeed, it all makes sense to me. I think a good way I've had it explained a few times before is they're basically just signposts for the chatbot, really, aren't they? Take them down this route now, take them down this route, and take them down this route.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. So this is now created. Perfect. So obviously now we want to create three different options. So we have live chat, phone call, face to face. Depending on the things you want to on whichever one the user is going to pick, something different needs to happen. So if the user picks live chat, obviously live chat needs to trigger. So there needs to be a nice message explaining that someone's coming to help. If it's a phone call, what we might do is let the user know that an HR representative has received their inquiry and will call them as soon as possible. And if it's a face-to-face, we'll probably want to try and book a meeting straight from the bot. So just to make sure that everything's nice and smoothly done. So we're going to create these three right now. So as you can see, I keep clicking this little plus button at the bottom, which just keeps adding steps. So we're going to start with live chat. Okay, and this is where we can use that trigger or that signpost that Jacob was just talking about. So if a message is sent to the bot, which is equals to live chat, which is, as you remember, is the little key that was hidden behind the button, we're going to do this thing. So here, so far we've used standard messages, quick replies, which was these sliding buttons, and actions, which were these big buttons. What we can do now as well is just use a progress message. So as you can see here in the top right, it has this little 3 dots activity there, like a little GIF going round and round, which just shows to the user, please wait, something's happening. And we can just type, no problem, someone is on the way. Please wait. Oops, wait. Perfect. So as you can see, if I create this now, it will be added just below here. It's really, really evident to the user that something is going on. They're not just seeing, if you imagine, if I were to hide this little GIF here or change this actually to, let's just do a standard message, completely fine. Someone is on their way, it would work, but it's just a bit less visually appealing. It's a little bit less, yeah, the UI is just not there yet. So with this progress bar, it's just really, really evident. Please wait, someone just will be there. Okay, so this is the first transition to live chat. So if people pick live chat, they go to this. Now, what we want to do is create the other two. So obviously, so far I've just been clicking this plus button that's at the bottom of the conversation, but here we want to do something slightly different, which is add another option, basically lateral to this this one option we've already created, one for the phone call, one for the face-to-face. So we're going to do face-to-face. Let's see, face-to-face. Okay, so a message is sent. Jacob, turn off your phone.
It's been a very long time since my phone's been on loud.
Yeah, I know. It's like 1999 here. Soon you'll have vibrations as well. What the hell?
No, it was not even an interesting message either. Just a message from my bank.
Not even interesting. Okay, so this is a face-to-face. So what we want to do with face-to-face is we probably want to schedule a meeting for this. Because yeah, face-to-face, you don't necessarily have time. You need to go over to that office, or yeah, I guess in COVID times you wouldn't actually go and meet anyone face-to-face. But let's just imagine that the world is back to normal, and you want to book this meeting. So again, we've used standard, we've used quick replies, we've used actions, we've used progress. Now we're going to go into the composer types. Composer types are actually different ways of displaying a specific message type. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but there's a whole load of composer types that could be really, really valuable. In this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to use the date and time. You'll see why exactly when we actually use the bot in a minute. But just for your own knowledge, you could have some stuff that's hidden. You can have an authorization code, a loading thing for payments, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, we're not going to go into all of this right now. But we're going to use a date and time. So no problem. When would you like to meet? All right. So we're going to create that. And now, as you can see, I have two branches coming out of this previous message, one for face-to-face, one for live chat. And obviously we need to create the last one, which I'm going to do a bit quicker. A phone call, a message is sent that is equal to phone call, continue. And then for this one, now, if you remember, this is obviously an HR chatbot, and therefore the bot is most likely connected already to your internal HR portal, or all of the information about your employees is already stored somewhere. And so it's very likely that this bot already knows who this employee is, and all sorts of information about them, such as their name, their phone number, etc., etc. And so in this step, just to make things a bit quicker, what we're going to do is we're just going to say, no problem. We have your phone number. I can't type. I'm trying to make things quicker, but I can't type, so it's not helpful. On file, someone will call you as soon as possible. All right, done. Okay, so now we have these three branches coming out of this previous branch. Perfect. So we have one that's just gonna end right here, which is the phone call. Someone will call you as soon as possible. Super simple. One that the live chat is gonna quote unquote end here. It's not going to really, because someone will have to take over this, which we're gonna have a look at in a minute. But really that's sort of the end of the conversation. And then one which is the face-to-face, where the user will have to pick a time and date. So what we wanna do is we probably wanna give some sort of feedback to the user once they've picked the time and date, just to let them know, yep, no problem, your meeting has been booked. So what we're going to do here is add another message that will come from this specific conversation side of the conversation here. So I'm going to use this button again, and I'm just going to say confirm face-to-face meeting, and the message is just sent. Perfect. No problem. I keep using no problem. Your meeting has been booked for time plus date. So we're going to change that in a minute. Okay. Transition, perfect. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick look at live chat. First, before I move forward, does this all make sense to you, Jacob? Are we on the right track?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so it all makes sense to me. So by this point, we've kind of, depending on what the user chose, we've got their 3 different options set up. And say if they do choose for a face-to-face meeting, we've kind of got a little bit of a follow-up just to confirm that the meeting has been booked in place.
Exactly. So okay. Now
we've got a quick question coming in here, which is from one of our live viewers. They were just wondering about whether you could, so the options we've chosen here, these 3, if they're, say, the final options, or if you have more options, say, for example, send an email there.
As in a 4th option here on this line.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's just basically asking if those are the only 3 that you can go for, if you can make your own custom ones.
Oh no, you can absolutely do your custom ones. There's all sorts of things that you could do. So you could do an email. So you could send an email straight away. So from here, for instance, you've already given. Let's say that you've given sickness as your issue, and you've given some information here. What you could do is add another button that's just send my information across to HR or something like that. And that could send an email to HR. So that would be very simple. You could have stuff like add a ticket into HR. You could have stuff like add a ticket into some sort of CRM. Excuse me, some sort of CRM. For some reason, I know some companies use HubSpot as a CRM for HR, which is really weird to me, but they do so. And so you can do that from here as well. All sorts of options available.
I suppose, well, you could kind of make this incredibly complex as well and have different options for after HR's working hours as well. Obviously, it'd be a bit more of a complex conversation than the one we're making now, but you can kind of really personalize it depending upon your own priorities.
Definitely, and this is actually quite a good point, because that's going to drive us towards the conversation we need to have at the end of this, which is making this conversation scalable as well. So let's park this for a minute. We'll get back to it towards the end of this call. I just want to make sure we finish this conversation, and then we'll go through that together. Yeah. Okay, cool. So live chat here. What we want to do here is we want to basically, when this when the user gets to this specific message, we want to trigger live chat. The good thing here is we have a very simple way of doing this. We can just set up an action here. Actions will be sent when a user reaches this step of the conversation. So it's pre-built, it's in there, super simple. So I can add an action, which is request human action, save this, and assuming your live chat is activated, and your live chat is on, which we'll turn on in a second. When the user hits this step, your live chat HR or your HR team will get a live chat claim, a live chat ticket, sorry, that they can claim and start talking to the users. So we'll look at that in a minute. The next thing I want to do is quickly add a variable. We've talked about variables many times in previous episodes. The purpose of variables is just to capture some information from the user, store it into a little variable that we can reuse later on. If you remember here, or if you look at it here, what we're doing is we're asking the user for a time and date at which they would like to meet. And what I want to do is save that response that they give us as a variable so that we can return it here again, just to confirm the time and date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, I'm going to do integrations. As you can see, we have no variable, not integrations, sorry, variables. As you can see, we don't have any variables here at the moment, but I can create one, book meeting time. So this is the name of the variable. So now this is existing. This is something we can use. And we'll go back to the conversation builder. We'll go and contact HR, which is the one we just created. And at this step, what we're going to do is we're going to add this variable into the transition. So when the user goes from the face-to-face inquiry to the next step, which is confirmed face-to-face meeting, we're going to log whatever they've said here as the time and date into this variable. Perfect. And now this should appear here. As you can see, it's here. And then we now can replace this time plus date placeholder that I put there initially for meeting time. Perfect. Whew. Okay. So the final thing I want to do before we test this is turn on live chat. For those of you who don't know, we have a live chat system and ticketing system for live chats pre-built into the ubisend platform, so you don't need to have separate services. You can do if you'd like to, but okay, so I just turned it on, perfect. So when enable, users can select live chat as a fallback option, and it's open between 9 and 5, which means that right now it should all be working properly. Okay, should we go and test this bot? So it was CHR, wasn't it? Okay, no problem. I can pass you on to HR. What is your reason for contacting? So let's say I want to raise. Yep, I want a raise because, oops, amazing. Okay, how would you like to contact HR, your HR team? So we'll obviously do all three of them. Let's do a phone call for now. So this is probably the simplest one. No problem, we have your phone number on file. Someone will call you as soon as possible. Conversation is over. Super simple. Now let's start again from the top, just to make sure that we can do all three options. Okay, I can pass you on to HR, salary and pay. I'm going to do these quickly. Give more money. And I'm going to do a face-to-face meeting. So I really like to go and make my case face-to-face. And so the chatbot is obviously very forthcoming about that, and will schedule a meeting for me. Simple. When would you like to meet? I'd like to meet. So if you remember, I changed this message type or the composer type into a date and time composer, which gives us the option, or gives the user this option of pulling up a calendar and a nice clock that we'll see in a second, which really makes things a lot easier for us for the user to pick a time and date. This does a few things. We touched quite a bit on that before in the previous episode, but it does a few things. It makes it easier for users to just pick a time and date. It's just a lot easier. It also standardized the answers. So if you send the 5th of January 2021, it's going to do 5th January 2021 or 5/01 2021, which, as you know, if you're in different time zones or in different countries, the formatting is sometimes different. And also third-party applications sometimes require very specific format, which can be difficult if you just leave the user to free text it. And so here we make sure that everything is standardized text. So I'm going to use 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and just send that. Okay, And so I said the 6th of January 2021 at 2 p.m. And the bot just responded, your meeting has been booked for the 6th of January 2021 at 2 p.m. Okay. So as you can see, we logged my answer into this variable like I showed you before, and then this variable is reused to confirm to the user that their meeting is booked at the right time. Okay, final one. What I want to do is I'm going to have live chat open next to me, just so you can see the what's happening in the back end. So in here, I'm obviously in the demo section of the platform, which allows you to test the bot as much as you'd like. But you have to imagine that this bot now is on your HR portal or on somewhere where your employees are actually talking to it. And this tab here on the right is actually an HR representative that's sitting there in the back end, working, waiting for tickets to come in to start answering them. So we're going to trigger this conversation again. I still want more money. And I want to do live chat. Okay, so now we have this little box saying that we're waiting. And as you can see, there's a new live chat request. There was, I don't know if you've seen it because I clicked, oh, there we go. I clicked quite quickly into it, but in the tab, there is a little notification that says live chat new request. And so the HR representative can go and try and not miss this notification. And then they can go into the back end of the live chat and just essentially claim the ticket. And now all of a sudden someone has joined the chat. So as you can see, Alex de Becker has joined the chat. Now it's a bit confusing because I'm obviously Alex de Becker and I'm also the person who's talking in the back end, but hopefully it's quite clear. And myself as the HR rep, I can say, no, you don't deserve more money. Yep. Okay. And so this message has been sent, and me as the employee here, I'm receiving this message saying, no, I don't deserve more money. See ya. And then this is the end of the conversation. So as you can see, I can have a back and forth. Please. I can have a back and forth here between the employee and the HR rep. And all of this can happen in real time. And then the HR rep can just finally decide, okay, this person is just being silly. I want to mark this as resolved and close the ticket. What I can do as well is I can delete the request if I just feel like this is not really relevant, or I can unclaim the request, which could be valuable if me as the HR representative, I'm actually not quite sure how to deal with salary claims. I could unclaim the request and let someone on my team pick it up who will be more qualified. So for now, I'm just going to mark this as resolved. And now we're back to not having any tickets, and the user should have received a little message saying your live chat has ended. If you have any more questions, please let me know. Whew. All right, this whole conversation has been built. Was that what you had in mind, Jacob?
Yeah, I think I'm very impressed. You've ticked off all the boxes. It was kind of quite a long, complex conversation with quite a few options there. So yeah, I'm very impressed.
Very good. Well, so okay, so like I mentioned at the start, we usually would end this here, so to speak. We've built this bot in 45 minutes, which is pretty much on the dot, exactly what we're trying to do with these episodes. So that's perfect. This is a really good bot. It works perfectly. This is a perfect use case for using a bot. Yeah, completely standard. And I would say most HR chatbots, I'm sure you'll agree, Jacob, will have this conversation in one form or another. It just makes a lot of sense to have this. Now, what I want to quickly touch on is scalability. So we touched on this semi in passing whilst we were building it. But I think it was someone who asked a question about this as well, which is really timely, so that's quite good. Here in this step of the conversation, what we have here is we have these 3 different branchings, sending the user down a different path depending on what they want to do. What I've done here is I've built this conversation with the Think Chatbot episode in mind. So what I've done is I've created this conversation in a very linear way, top to bottom, makes a lot of sense. I can show you all of this. It works all perfectly for the 45 minutes I spent building this. And then once we turn off this video recording, I can go and delete it and not really think about it anymore. what I've missed here is if I were to do this actually for a real company or for my company, I would probably build it in a slightly different way. Here I have the linear flow from top to bottom goes all the way to 3 options, and then the 3 options are presented within the same conversation. What's missing here is that these 3 options of contacting HR, so face-to-face, live chat, or phone call, are actually things that your bot should be able to trigger elsewhere than just through this conversation. So that's quite important. So let's say that this conversation starts because someone sent the word help. Okay, that makes sense. So you go all the way down, you go to the 3 options. Now, what happens if someone is asking an FAQ to your bot, and then you'd like to give them a button to start live chat or a button to start a face-to-face meeting booking? What you've done, if you do that, is you have multiple versions of the same process replicated across different conversations. So the way to circumvent this is actually to extract. I keep making hand movements as if you could see it. But what you want to do is basically extract this whole section here. You want to extract this whole section here and create 3 different short conversations for each of them that you can then call at different places within your bot. I hope this sort of makes sense. So here we have a schedule a call conversation, we have a book a meeting conversation, we have a trigger live chat conversation. What you want to do is you want to be able to have another completely different, I messed up. You want to have the option of having completely different sources of your users getting to the schedule a call, for instance, conversation, really simply available. So you want to be able to do all of this as well. You don't want this conversation or this process here of scheduling a call with your HR team to be absolutely tied to this previous message in this specific conversation. So instead of doing that, what you want to do is you want this transition here to actually be something like send them to another conversation completely. So here, instead of having all of them in the same conversation, what I would have is I would go into the overview conversation, and I would create one conversation, which is trigger HR live chat. And then I would create another, I'm just going to do this. And then I would create another conversation, which is trigger HR book meeting, etc. And so what I would do essentially is from this step here, I wouldn't send them to a next step below it. What I would do is I would send people from the moment when they click this message, I would send them straight into another conversation. Okay, so this does a few things. The first thing it does is that it makes it possible to trigger these, let's say, book a call or schedule a meeting or trigger live chat. It makes it possible to trigger these processes from anywhere within the bot. So if you have an FAQ, you can add a button that will then trigger booking a meeting, for instance. You don't need to recreate that whole thing. But the second thing that it does is that it separates the processes in a way that makes it a lot more scalable later on. So if, let's say, all of a sudden you need to change your schedule a meeting process because something has changed, or the email address that it sends to is not the same, or whatever it is, you can actually very easily figure out that, okay, book a meeting, that's the one I need to go change. Not contacting HR or whatever you've called it, because there's one step in that specific conversation that you need to go and change. Here you have a specific conversation that you know very well is exactly the one that you need to go and modify. You're not losing these processes in the middle of bigger or wider conversations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a bit like, I suppose, like trying to think of an analogy for this here. It would be almost the contacting a HR conversation takes them along part of the journey. Then when they decide where they want to get off, they get off at that station. So rather than having to change different messages within every conversation, you just have to change this main station message.
Yeah, exactly. So the one conversation should be one process and one goal. And so the contacting HR is one process, which is I want to contact HR, and then the bot gives you all of the information about doing this. But then, as you say, I actually want to trigger live chat right now. This is a completely different process than booking a phone call or booking a meeting. And so what you want to do for scalability is you want to separate them to make it easier to manage later on, easier to, again, scale, easier to use them in other parts of your conversations or in FAQs, etc. It just makes things a lot easier. Now, don't get me wrong, you could build this absolutely the way I've just built it, and as you could see, it works perfectly. So it's sort of a style decision, and it sort of depends a bit on how big of an HR department or an HR quote unquote issue you have within your business. You might not want to go this granular. But I would say it's a good best practice if you want to have something that's really scalable later on. And the final point I want to make on this is a very different way. Ubisend platform allows you to do this, which is very, very different than most chatbot platforms will allow you to build conversations. So in most platforms, what you'll have one big page like this with all of the flows into one big page, and it gets really, really complicated and it gets really crazy. And then if you need to change one little bit out of all of this, you're basically lost, and you have a really hard time to change this, because if I change this little process here at some point in 2 years, what's going to happen to all of these processes just below it that are intimately tied to it? This gets really, really complicated. And so the Ubisend platform actually allows you to do something completely different, which is have as many conversations, as little as they might be, to allow you to really manage all of the different processes that you might have in even tied to one bigger process. So it's a really key difference here that is important to make. Okay, I think this covered everything we wanted to cover.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I quite enjoyed the taking a few more minutes at the end just to kind of go over things and discuss kind of doing them maybe in a bit more of a different way, or planning for scalability and stuff. It's quite a nice way to end the video. I think we should work it into a few more in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always many different ways of skinning a cat, or whatever the expression is, and with chatbot technology and complex technologies in general. I mean, you could say the same for setting up email campaigns, for instance, or email automation or things like that. There are many different ways we could do all of these things. But thinking of the future is always really, really important in this sort of stuff. And obviously, because we have the experience, might as well share it,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all very much for attending. If you have any questions, I see that we did skip a few. Just feel free to send them to Jacob or myself after this. And if you're watching this as a recording, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do release quite a lot of videos recently, and we're going to continue throughout 2021. So make sure you don't miss any of that. If you'd like to join us live next time to ask your questions and maybe just make fun of Jacob's non-beard live with us, you can go to ubisend.com/drop-in. You'll see the link in the description of the video. And finally, if you want to talk to us about purchasing a license or seeing a more personalized demo, just go to ubisend.com/demo, or again, just ask us, and we'll be there to help. Thank you very much. Jacob, you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye, everybody, and hopefully not too many of you bullying me on my beard next week.
We'll try not to. All right. See you.